What if I told you that behind the towering minarets and shimmering domes of the Ottoman Empire, beyond the fragrant rose gardens and the polished marble courtyards, there thrived a world that few dared to speak of. A world not ruled by sultans or generals, but by desire, secrecy, and forbidden affection. It's a world where young boys, hand-picked for their beauty and poise, were not raised to become scholars, warriors, or rulers, but to become companions. Male concubines. Male concubine, adored in public, desired in private, and then, like whispers in the night, erased from the pages of history. This isn't a tale of slaves or servants. It's not about eunuchs or janissaries. This is about the boys who lived not behind veils, but behind veils of silence. They were symbols of refinement and masculine prestige. To love one wasn't scandalous, it was celebrated. For centuries, they were a cherished, even essential part of elite Ottoman society. Their presence in the court was both delicate and commanding, visible and invisible. And yet, like all things that shine too brightly, their era was doomed to be extinguished by the shadows of changing times. Many believe that harems were exclusively the domain of veiled women, dancing to the whims of powerful men. But that's only half the story. Across ancient civilizations, from the poetic courts of Persia to the philosophical cities of Greece, and even the imperial palaces of China, young men were kept not for labor, but for companionship. The Ottomans, one of the most sophisticated empires in world history, were no exception. Here, male concubines weren't merely tolerated, they were flaunted. Their beauty was a luxury, their charm an ornament of high culture. Being seen with such a youth on one's arm was a statement of power, of taste, of control, They were known as yamaks, and their lives, while gilded in gold, were anything but simple. Selected as early as the age of 8 or 9, these boys were often taken from conquered territories. Their parents promised wealth or favor in exchange. Inside the palace walls, they were trained not just in music, dance, and literature, but in subtlety, in pleasure, in becoming the perfect confidant and companion. Their education was rich and rigorous, sometimes even rivaling that of future statesmen. But their future, that was never their own to decide. A Venetian envoy once wrote in awe of the court, describing over 500 young boys, ages 8 to 20, living inside the palace. He called them the delight of the Signor. They lived in gender-specific quarters, under the constant supervision of high-ranking palace officials. They were not allowed to leave, not until they had outgrown their beauty, or been deemed worthy of political placement. But here's where the paradox lies. These boys were not hidden. They were not secrets. They were paraded, celebrated, and woven into the very culture of the elite. Sultans and officials alike kept them openly. The Ottomans didn't label their desires the way we do today. There was no such thing as gay or straight. Instead, roles were divided simply: the dominant and the submissive, the active and the passive. As long as a man maintained his masculine position, loving another man was not only acceptable, it was fashionable. Yet being admired did not equate to being protected. Behind every silk robe was a cage. Behind every poetic glance, a trap of expectations and limits. Because the moment a boy ceased to be useful, whether because he aged, fell in love, or threatened the hierarchy, he became disposable. Their power, like their beauty, was fleeting. Take the chilling, almost mythical tale of Tahir and Tib. 2 young Ottoman men captured by Christian noblemen in a border skirmish, but instead of chains and cruelty, they were met with kindness. Their captors, wealthy, cultured men, fell deeply in love with them. What began as conquest turned to compassion. For a brief, shining moment, it seemed love could conquer politics, religion, and war. But society wasn't ready. Neither the Christian world nor the Muslim one could accept a love that defied boundaries. The result? Imprisonment, shame, separation. Tahir and Tib were eventually released. Their lovers were not. And yet, the story didn't end there. In a daring and deeply emotional act, the Christian noblemen escaped their prisons and fled to reunite with Tahir and Tib. In an attempt to be accepted, they converted to Islam, hoping that by embracing Ottoman faith and culture, they could be free to love openly. Free to love openly. It was a desperate gamble, and it failed. The tide of history was turning, and love like this no longer had a place in this world. You see, as the Ottoman Empire expanded, it also opened itself to Western influence, and with it came new ideas of morality, of sin, of what was a civilized, of sin, of what was a civilized. These foreign concepts began to seep into the very fabric of Ottoman society, and what had once been normal, even noble, was now seen as deviant. In 1858, the blow came hard and fast. The Ottoman Penal Code criminalized public acts deemed contrary to modesty. The law didn't name homosexuality outright, but the intent was clear. The atmosphere turned cold. Hostile. Men suspected of same-sex love were beaten in the streets, their heads shaved as a mark of shame. Some were assaulted. The once silken world of the male beloved dissolved under the weight of fear and violence. And yet, the Quran had not changed. So what had? Historians point to the West. Along with steam engines, political reform, and industrial might, Europe had also brought its own rigid version of morality, and the Ottomans, eager to be seen as modern and civilized, began to internalize it. What was once poetry became perversion. What had been affection became an accusation. Still, some resisted. Tahir and Tib held on to each other, despite the chaos around them. Their love, born in captivity, tested by religion, and hunted by law, endured. But it wasn't enough to change history. By the close of the 19th century, the age of the male concubine was over. Women, once sequestered in harems, became the new focus of courtly affection. Ottoman writers of the time lamented the change. One wrote bitterly, "A woman lovers have increased in number, while boy beloveds have decreased. It is as if the people of Lot have been swallowed by the earth." And so an entire chapter of Ottoman life, one filled with color, complexity, and contradiction, vanished almost overnight. Today, few records remain. Most were burned, buried, or ignored. But if you dig deep enough, you'll still find traces. Hints of boys who once walked gilded halls, who were loved, used, and forgotten, who held power and yet were powerless. Tahir and Tib's story reminds us of something essential. That love, real love, can bloom in even the harshest of places. It adapts, it survives, it defies law, logic, and time. It dares to exist when everything is telling it not to. In the golden chambers of sultans, in the dark cells of prisons, love endured. So now I ask you, was this secret world a sign of sophistication, a bold testament to Ottoman tolerance? Or was it a mask, hiding power imbalances, coercion, and exploitation behind silks and poetry? History doesn't give us easy answers, but it gives us stories, and sometimes that's more powerful than certainty. If you want more shocking, thought-provoking stories from the forgotten pages of history, subscribe, like, and stay with us on this journey into the unknown, because what's buried isn't always gone, and what was once silenced is ready to be heard.